What do Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and Tony Robbins have in common? Aside from being tremendously wealthy, not all that much actually, except maybe one distinct thing: the #MeToo movement. Now, before I continue, I want to invite you just for a moment to put aside any kind of preconceived ideas that you have about the Me Too movement, whether that is good, bad, or chaotic neutral, and I want you to just bear with me. Because in this video today, I want to talk about why self-help doesn't care about real issues, and why instead of tackling social problems that we're facing or problems to do with our culture on the whole, they instead focus on rugged individualism and a whole bunch of other things that just simply do not matter. At an Unleash the Power Within seminar, a overpriced 3.5-day event where Tony Robbins goes over the exact same concepts that you would find in your average self-help blog, but with the charisma of a faith healer, Tony Robbins had this to say about the Me Too movement. If you use the Me Too movement to try to get significance and certainty by attacking and destroying someone else, you haven't grown an ounce. All you've done is basically use a drug called significance to make yourself feel good. When challenged on this in person, he doubled down on what it was that he was saying. "I'm not knocking the Me Too movement," he said. "I'm knocking victimhood, whatever that means." And when a video clip of his stance on the Me Too movement, which goes much further beyond the statement there, was leaked online, he posted a hasty apology and the world quickly moved on. But it was that moment that started me thinking about how the self-help movement on the whole really downplays a lot of social issues that we are facing right now, how it downplays things like racism, sexism, homophobia, and a whole lot of other stuff. Things that cannot be simply fixed by the power of positive thinking. And whilst I couldn't possibly break down every literal way in which self-help fails to address real-world issues, I can still talk about this to the best of my ability. A popular self-help quote, often misattributed to Bill Gates, says something along the lines of, "If you are born poor, then that's not your fault. But if you die poor, then that is your fault." And I want to use that quote as kind of a very salient example of how self-help views the world and its problems and the solutions to those problems. I'm not saying that this is something that every single person in the self-help community believes, but it is a prime example of some of the ways that they just downplay certain issues, in this case the problem of poverty. So obviously this quote is a massive misunderstanding of how the world works, and especially how money works, how wealth is distributed across society, and how inequalities when it comes to money can present themselves. Even if you were to go ahead and completely ignore all the countries that are not successful in the ways that a lot of Western countries are, when you look at countries like the US, UK, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, even if you don't look at countries outside of this little Western bubble that we have, this statement and statements like it do not hold up against even a little bit of scrutiny. Now, it is true to say that if you are born poor, that is not your fault. However, dying poor is simply an inevitability for a great majority of people in the world. In the UK alone, thousands of people freeze to death every year because they cannot afford to pay gas or electricity bills. An arbitrary drawing of a poverty line at 60% of the median UK household income puts over 20% of people living and eventually dying in poverty. Average cost of living is rising, and wage earnings are stagnating, flatlining, and in some cases, even falling. These are not things within our individual control, and yes, whilst there are some people who do escape the circumstances of their birth, the vast majority of people are unable to do that. Quite simply, they will never get the opportunity to do that. But even this doesn't tell the full story of whether or not it's your fault if you die poor. In the UK, if you're a Bangladeshi, a Pakistani, or a Black African, the likelihood of you living in poverty is 65%, 55% and 45% respectively. If you're a minority from inner London, then there is a 70% chance that you're living in poverty. And if you throw in other various penalties that you will incur simply for existing whilst being a woman, things like the pink tax, the motherhood penalty, then the picture gets progressively bleaker. If you are trans, non-binary, if you're gay, a lesbian, if you're bisexual, pansexual, gender non-conforming, or anything that falls under the LGBTQ plus spectrum, then you are also going to be facing a monumental amount of discrimination across the course of your life as well. Some of it will be in your face and some of it will not be. And in terms of all of these issues, I am not the most qualified person to be breaking them down, because a lot of these issues don't affect me, and they certainly don't seem to be affecting the people who are spouting this self-help advice that isn't actually helping people, because it fails to acknowledge what the material reality is for the majority of people in the world. And to be clear, this isn't some doomer take on how all of our individual differences are some kind of insurmountable obstacle that we can never overcome. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not stupid. Rather, it is an indictment of self-help's central tenet that through rugged individualism and hard work, you can beat the odds, when maybe we shouldn't be thinking about beating the odds at all. Maybe we should be thinking about changing the game itself so that people don't have to beat the odds in order to live a life above the poverty line. So let's talk a little bit about why self-help doesn't want you to think about real issues, why it doesn't want you to think about how your race and how your gender identity and how your sexuality all kind of works together to create the outcomes that you are going to experience in your life to a certain extent. So self-help has this pretty weird view on victimhood, which it seems to loosely define as any time you complain about the realities of life. You were born into a poor inner city area with underfunded education, with poor public transport and poor infrastructure, with not many job opportunities, with violence and crime going around, you know, on a daily basis, you know, and you've struggled to pull yourself up from then. Stop complaining about it. Don't be such a victim. Just be an individual and work harder and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Don't be a victim is one of the central points of self-help. Self-help doesn't want you to think about your race, your gender identity, your sexuality, whether or not you are working class. Why? Simply because thinking of yourself as a part of a broader social group is antithetical to their business aims. You see, self-help only works as a business model if all the people engaging in it think of themselves as an individual and not a part of a broader class or a broader group of people. You don't have to worry about racism or homophobia or misogyny. All you have to do is think positive, set goals and work hard, and that'll get you to where you want to be in the end. You know, just believe in yourself. And buy this book, which will tell you to invest in this audio program, which was recorded at this live event that you should attend. It costs £3,000, but don't worry about that. Put that on a credit card. You know, you'll be making 10 times the amount once you've gone to the course and once you've started to apply this in your life. And while you're at that event, you know, I encourage you to join this mastermind group of like-minded individuals, all striving towards becoming the person that they were meant to be, But, it's not just that mastermind group. There's another upsell into the inner circle of that mastermind group. Now, yes, it will cost you your entire yearly salary, but think about the amount of money that you could be making by networking with other people who are spending their entire year's salary in order to be there. And the grift goes on and on and on. But if you start thinking about the material conditions of your place in society and how the hierarchies of our societies are structured and where your place is on that hierarchy, then you might start to think of yourself as not just an individual. You might start to think of yourself as part of a broader movement, a broader group, a broader class. You might start to think about how to change that system rather than investing in your own mindset. So they tell you that you just shouldn't be a victim. Remember that the Me Too movement started off by women who were victims of sexual violence and sexual assault and rape and so much more coming out and saying, this is what happened to me, and other people saying, it happened to me too. And then Tony Robbins came along and said, that's victimhood. Don't think about misogyny or, all these things that statistically about 25% of women is going to face in their life at one point or another. Don't think about any of that. Don't be a victim. Don't try to gain significance by pulling down the people that have been perpetrating these things. Just work hard. Just be an individual. And remember, above all else, don't be a victim. Which is strange because victimhood is not something that you take on. Victimhood is something that happens to you. Something that Tony Robbins doesn't seem to understand. They tell you that you can escape your circumstances by working hard and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. A phrase literally designed to mock the concept that it has come to represent now. They tell you to do everything except question why the system and society is structured in the way that it is, why everything seems to be so stacked against you if you fall along certain lines of intersection in our society. Because whilst the rare success of an individual due to self-help is a good thing, how does it benefit the rest of the world? One person managing to go from living in abject poverty to earning $1 million a year, living in a really nice house and driving a really nice car and having an amazing family is great. I would wish that for everyone, but how does that help everyone else? One person escapes and 999,999 other people are left behind. Nothing has changed. And some of you are probably thinking, well, what about Tony Robbins and other self-help gurus' philanthropic work? And a more nihilistic version of myself might go ahead and point out that most of the time philanthropic work and charity donations from anyone who is a millionaire or a wealthy person, a billionaire, someone like that, is usually for the purpose of tax avoidance and reputation laundering. But that's a video perhaps for another time, maybe one that doesn't even belong on this channel. The truth about philanthropy is that it doesn't work. It never has. We've had philanthropy and charity for a long time. And whilst it does have some positive impacts, the world is more or less the same. People are still living and dying in poverty. People are still starving to death when there is another way. We don't have to rely on the goodwill of millionaires and billionaires. It has had centuries to work, and it has not. Tony Robbins has a net worth of almost $500 million, $500 million or thereabouts. If he wanted to, he could give away 95% of his wealth and make a tremendous difference to a massive amount of people. He would still have 5% of his wealth. $25 million is not a net worth to turn one's nose up against. And of course, if he was to make wise investments and withdraw money from his investments at a 4% rate annually, then he could still live on a delightful $1 million a year. a salary far greater than the majority of us will ever receive in our lives. And sure, he's fed millions of people with his philanthropic work, but with his influence, the fact that he knows the elites of the world, I'm talking presidents, I'm talking big business owners, I'm talking CEOs, I'm talking about the most powerful people in the world. He knows these people, and he could use his influence to make change happen, for a lot of people. But that would interfere with his idea of individualism. It would interfere with his personal profit. And plus, you can't get the government involved in helping people. That would be communism, and communism is bad, remember. So instead, he bought an esports team and a fricking island instead. And he still charges thousands of dollars for his followers to come and sit in a crowded theatre to listen to him speak about how if they work hard and invest in further courses and supplements and books, that one day, maybe just one day, he can afford a second island. And to be clear, I don't begrudge Tony Robbins the amount of money that he has earned through his life. I just don't like that it's done through pretty clear exploitation and lying about the structure of the world and what it takes to escape poverty, to escape the rat race, to escape the conditions that the vast majority of the world still exist within. We are not prospering through this idea of rugged individualism and hard work and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. Some self-help gurus such as Jordan Peterson have even gone as far as to say that we shouldn't even attempt to change the world unless we have our own house in order, which is of course advice that he didn't even follow to begin with. So much for it being one of the 12 rules for life, I suppose. Self-help has become something of a misnomer and ultimately a distraction away from the things that we should actually be doing to make the world a better place. We should be helping each other. We should be fighting for change. We should be, for lack of a less flowery way to put it, joining arms and fighting against the things that are holding back the majority of people. This means becoming aware of the issues that are affecting people: race, sexuality, gender identity, whether or not you are working class or not. You can't just walk into an inner city school in Hackney in London and just tell the kids there, you just need to work hard. You just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Don't be a victim. Just ignore the fact that there are various systemic and institutional issues that can and will hold you back throughout the course of your lifetime. 20% of women and 4% of men, at a conservative estimate, are going to face some kind of sexual assault or sexual abuse during the course of their lives, and you cannot hashtag alpha or girl boss your way out of that. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend that it will all be okay if we just think more positively and to believe in ourselves. This isn't some nihilistic doomer video telling you to just lay down and die because there's nothing any of us can do. That is another lie. There is so much that we can do, and there's so much that we should do. And to be clear, you should still work on yourself. You should always be working towards self-improvement, but understand that that is only one part of the puzzle. This video is a call to action for people who are overly involved in the self-help world to stop thinking of themselves as an individual. Yes, work on yourself. We all should be doing that, but we all need to be fighting back against the way that we even got into the position that we are in. We have to see and understand the things that are holding us back, and then together we can try and fix it.